Welcome to Beyond Eternity. We're a brand new channel, and your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment to help us grow. Now, let's begin tonight's chilling story. Have you ever walked into a place so silent that even your own breath felt too loud? Tonight, I will share 5 true scary stories that are said to keep you awake long after the lights go out. These are not tales of fantasy, but real encounters, whispered on late-night forums and passed between those who swear they lived them. The first begins inside an abandoned hospital. There was a man who worked as a night security guard in a crumbling medical building on the edge of town. The hospital had closed down years before, but the property owners kept one guard on site to make sure no one broke in. Most nights were the same: empty halls, flickering lights, the smell of mold and rust. But one night, something changed. At around 2 a.m., as he walked his usual rounds, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor behind him. Sharp, heavy, deliberate. He froze. He knew he was the only one assigned to that shift. With his flashlight shaking in his hand, he turned and shined it down the hallway. Nothing. Just peeling paint and empty gurneys lined against the walls. He tried to brush it off. Old buildings make noises, he told himself. But then, the overhead lights began to flicker in sequence, one by one, as if something invisible was walking beneath them. The air grew colder. His breath came out in visible puffs, though it was summer outside. As he reached the old operating theater, he swore he heard voices. A woman crying. A doctor's muffled orders. He leaned in, pressing his ear to the heavy double doors. And then, bang! Something slammed from the inside, rattling the rusted hinges. He stumbled back, heart pounding. But what he saw next stayed with him forever. From the small square window of the operating room door, a pale face appeared. Hollow eyes, wide mouth, lips moving without sound. The face pressed against the glass as if desperate to get out. He dropped his flashlight, and in that brief moment of darkness, the crying turned into screams. When the beam of light returned, the window was empty. The hallway was silent again. But scratched deep into the paint of the door were words that hadn't been there before: "Don't let me stay." He quit his job the next morning. And to this day, the hospital remains locked, but locals say if you stand outside at night, you can still hear the faint sound of crying from inside. It was supposed to be just a game. A group of high school friends gathered for a weekend sleepover at one of their houses. The night started with movies, junk food, and laughter. But as the clock struck midnight, someone pulled an old Ouija board out from the back of a closet. They joked at first, daring each other to summon a spirit. They placed their fingers lightly on the planchette, asking silly questions like, "Who has a crush on me?" The board didn't move, and they laughed even harder. But then one girl asked, "Is there anyone here with us right now?" Slowly, the planchette slid to yes. They accused each other of pushing it, but every hand trembled. The air grew still. Something shifted in the room, like the walls were listening. Nervously, one boy asked, "Who are you?" The planchette moved, letter by letter, Sarah. None of them knew a Sarah. They asked, "What do you want?" The response came quickly, letmein. One of the girls screamed, pulling her hands away, but the planchette continued to move on its own, spelling over and over, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." Suddenly, a lamp in the corner flickered and went out. The house went cold, so cold their breath became visible. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, like someone limping closer. They huddled together, whispering that it wasn't real, that it couldn't be happening. The footsteps stopped just outside the living room door. Then, 3 knocks echoed, loud, deliberate. Knock. 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 The Ouija board flipped over on its own, the planchette sliding across the floor. The girls screamed, the boys ran to the door, but when they opened it, nothing. The hallway was empty. They didn't sleep that night. In the morning, they found deep scratches on the wooden floor where the board had been, as if something had been clawing to get through. No one ever brought the Ouija board back out again. But weeks later, one of the girls swore she woke up in the middle of the night to see a pale figure standing at the foot of her bed. Its lips moved, but no sound came, just like the face in the hallway that night. And when she turned on the light, the figure was gone, but the words "Let me in" were written in condensation on her window. It was a rainy night on a lonely stretch of highway. A man was driving home after working the late shift, windshield wipers squeaking against the glass, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The road was empty for miles, until he saw her. On the side of the highway stood a young woman, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her pale face. She wore a faded white dress that clung to her frame. She raised one arm, thumb extended in the universal sign for a ride. The driver slowed, unsure, but something in him couldn't leave her out there in the storm. He rolled down the window and asked if she needed help. She nodded silently, opening the passenger door and sliding in without a word. The smell of wet earth and something faintly metallic filled the car. As they drove, he tried to start small talk. "Rough night to be out here," he said. She didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, her eyes reflecting the headlights like glass. After a few minutes, he asked, "Where are you headed?" She turned her head slowly and whispered, barely audible, "Home." He nodded, unsure what she meant, but when they passed a road sign for the next town, she raised her hand and pointed. He turned down the side road, following her direction. Eventually they came to a small cluster of houses. She lifted her hand again, signaling to stop at a dark, weathered farmhouse at the end of the lane. He pulled up, turned to her, and the seat was empty. The door had never opened. The seatbelt was still buckled. Only the faint scent of rain lingered. His heart hammered in his chest. Gathering his courage, he stepped out of the car and walked up to the house. An old woman answered the door, her face lined with sorrow. When he explained that he had picked up a young woman in a white dress who asked to be brought here, the woman's eyes filled with tears. She invited him inside and showed him a framed photograph on the mantel. It was the same young woman he had seen, smiling brightly, alive. "My daughter," the woman whispered. "She died in a car accident on that highway, 10 years ago." The driver left shaken, his clothes still damp from the storm. He swore he never stopped for hitchhikers again. And to this day, Whenever it rains on that stretch of highway, some locals say you can still see her standing there, waiting for a ride home. Children are often said to be closer to the unseen world, their innocence allowing them to notice what adults ignore. But sometimes, what slips from a child's mouth is so chilling it cannot be forgotten. One mother recalled tucking her 4-year-old son into bed when he suddenly whispered, "Don't let Grandma take me tonight." Confused, she reminded him that Grandma had passed away years ago. The boy pointed to the corner of the room and said, "But she's right there, and she's angry." The mother turned, but nothing was there, only darkness. The next morning, the boy had no memory of saying it. Another story came from a father who was playing hide and seek with his daughter. When he pretended not to find her, she giggled and whispered, "Don't let the man in the closet tell you where I am." The father froze. The house had no closet in that room. When he asked her what she meant, she pointed to the wall. "He lives right there. He watches us all the time." A babysitter once shared that she was coloring with the little girl she watched when the child suddenly stopped, stared at the window, and said, "They're coming back tonight." The sitter asked, "Who?" The girl replied, "The black-eyed kids. They knock and ask to come in. Mommy told me never to open the door." The sitter laughed it off, until later that night, she swore she heard faint knocking at the front door, 3 times, steady, patient. Perhaps the most disturbing confession came from a 5-year-old boy riding in the back seat of his mother's car. Out of nowhere, he said calmly, "This is where I died last time." His mother nearly slammed the brakes. He pointed to a stretch of road and explained that he had been hit by a car before he was me. When she asked who he was then, he answered, "I was the other boy. But now I'm yours." Parents often dismiss these statements as imagination. But when you hear a child describe things they could not possibly know, names of relatives long dead, details of events they never witnessed, you are left with a question that chills you to the bone. Are children simply pretending, or are they speaking truths from the shadows that adults can no longer see? There is nothing more unsettling than waking up in the dead of night and realizing you are not alone. One woman learned this in the most terrifying way. She lived in a quiet suburban home, nothing unusual, nothing that hinted at the horror waiting for her. One night, around 3 a.m., she awoke suddenly. At first she thought it was a dream, but then she noticed it. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and that's when she saw it, a tall shadowy figure standing in the corner of her bedroom. No details, no face, just a mass of darkness darker than the night itself. She blinked, convinced it was a trick of her vision, but when her eyes opened again, it had moved closer. Frozen with fear, she tried to scream, but no sound came. The figure loomed near the foot of her bed, its shape bending unnaturally, as though it wasn't bound by human form. She could feel it watching her, though it had no eyes. Its presence pressed against her chest, heavy, suffocating, like invisible hands pinning her down. The clock on her nightstand ticked louder and louder, each second dragging into eternity. Finally, in desperation, she whispered a prayer. The moment she did, the shadow froze. Then, slowly, it backed away, retreating to the corner until it faded into the wall itself, as though it had never been there. She lay there trembling until morning, too afraid to close her eyes again. When dawn finally came, she convinced herself it was sleep paralysis, just a nightmare. But later that day, she noticed something chilling. On the wall where the shadow had disappeared, there were 3 deep scratch marks, marks that had not been there the day before. She never slept in that room again. And to this day, she swears that the shadow figure still follows her, appearing sometimes in the corner of her vision, waiting for the night she is too tired to pray. These were 5 true scary stories that will keep you awake tonight. Shadows in bedrooms, voices in empty halls, children whispering secrets they should never know, each one a reminder that sometimes the line between our world and the next is thinner than we think. Which story chilled you the most? Was it the hospital guard, the Ouija board, the hitchhiker, the children, or the shadow figure? Backhand index pointing right type, I believe, in the comments if you think these stories were real. And don't forget, subscribe for more terrifying encounters that will haunt your nights.